Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a myth that almost no one tells at bedtime because it's just a little too ridiculous to be taken seriously. And yet, somehow, it's the perfect story to fall asleep to. You're heading into ancient Greece, where golden gods are known more for hurling lightning bolts and seducing mortals than herding cows. Yes, cows. You find yourself drifting into the divine dust of Thessaly, with warm sunlight dappling your shoulders and the distant sound of hooves clopping through fields that smell like wild thyme, hay, and a slight hint of ambrosial ego. You're here to witness something deeply humbling. Apollo, god of music, prophecy, and don't touch my hair energy, has just been sentenced to an earthly job. Not as a hero, not even as a prophet. No, tonight, Apollo is, brace yourself, a cowherd. And let's be real, you probably wouldn't survive a week as an ancient Greek cowherd. Between the unpredictable livestock, the midday heat, and the casual interventions from scheming toddlers who happen to also be gods, it's no walk through Elysium. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. Drop it in the comments. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins, as many Greek tales do, with a tantrum. Apollo, ever radiant, had once again let his emotions get ahead of his better judgment. Some say it was over a slight, an insult from Zeus perhaps, or a failed romance that turned melodramatic. Others hint at a more curious event involving a dragon, a temple, and one too many prophetic riddles that backfired. Historians still argue whether the real reason was political or purely mythological poetic justice. Either way, it ends with Apollo being told, in no uncertain terms, to take a break from Mount Olympus and learn some humility, which is how the god of archery and sunshine finds himself in a grassy field, wearing sandals that definitely weren't designed for mud. You're walking beside him now. He's quiet, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed, not in fury exactly, but in the sulky way of someone who believes he's too radiant for this nonsense. His golden curls bounce slightly as he stomps, trying not to get grass stains on his white chiton. A satchel hangs at his side, unnecessarily decorative and probably embroidered by the muses. The first time he tries to whistle for the cows, nothing happens. He glares at you. Did you see them move? You shake your head. They were supposed to move. You nod solemnly. Then, in a moment of silent resignation, Apollo sits on a rock and sighs like the wind itself has disappointed him. The cows chew slowly, unimpressed. Time passes. You hear crickets. A fly buzzes past your ear. Apollo begins composing a poem under his breath about the tragedy of radiant men forced to work. Later, he picks up a crooked shepherd's staff. He holds it like it might turn into a lute if he stares hard enough. It doesn't. He tries poking a particularly stubborn cow in the rear. The cow swats at him with its tail. It's not going well. Still, something odd is happening. The sunlight stays soft around him. The cows, though unimpressed, don't run away. A small girl from a nearby village sneaks a peek and tells her mother that the shiny man is talking to himself about the moon. You and Apollo spend the night beside a quiet stream. He doesn't sleep. Gods don't really need to, but you do. You curl up in the grass and hear him softly plucking something invisible in the air, notes only the stars can follow. This is your introduction to one of mythology's weirdest episodes, the time the god of prophecy was grounded and sent to herd cows. It's equal parts comedy, humility, and weirdly heartfelt introspection, and it's only just beginning. Morning rolls in like a lazy cat, stretching golden paws across the pasture, and you wake to the sound of Apollo muttering something about hoof prints and poetic injustice. He's standing knee-deep in dewy grass, cloak draped over one shoulder like a toga, reluctantly attending a barn dance. You rise slowly, brushing off bits of moss and what might have been a beetle. The cows, well, they're mostly still here. A couple have wandered, chewing thoughtfully on shrubs that don't belong to them. Apollo narrows his eyes and exhales like someone who's tried yoga once and decided against it. It's the start of his second day as a divine cowherd, and he's already invented 12 metaphors for suffering and none for success. He squints at you. I am Apollo, bringer of light, oracle of Delphi. I should not have to count cows. And yet, he does, one by one, muttering under his breath, occasionally miscounting, and then sighing as if the universe itself conspired to make this more difficult than necessary. A local shepherd wanders by and offers him a fig. Apollo accepts it like it's a diplomatic offering and then promptly forgets to thank the man. You thank him instead, and the shepherd winks. You're minding the fancy one, eh? Good luck. Historians still argue whether Apollo's pastoral punishment was entirely symbolic or had actual cultic echoes. There are whispers of Thessalian rites in which young nobles played at being cowherds to prove humility, or perhaps the myth was born to justify certain regional rituals involving the sun and livestock. Either way, nobody expected Apollo to take to it naturally. But something strange happens mid-morning. Apollo, knee-deep in mud and irritation, begins humming. It's not one of his usual dramatic ballads or celestial hymns. It's simple, rhythmic, almost rustic. You recognize it as the same tune one of the shepherd boys had whistled earlier while carrying a goat over his shoulder. Apollo catches himself. He stops, looks embarrassed. You don't comment. By midday, he's sweating. Not glowing, not sparkling, just plain mortal-style sweating. It's a new look. A bee tries to nest in his hair. He swats it with more force than necessary and accidentally startles 2 cows into trotting away. He runs after them, cape flapping like an angry napkin. You do not help. This feels like a learning moment. Later, you both sit beneath an olive tree. Apollo plucks lazily at a stringed instrument he's whittled from a branch and some cowhide. He says it's not music, just noise, he mutters, but his fingers keep moving. You ask if he's ever worked a mortal job before. He scoffs. Please. I once disguised myself as a shepherd to woo a prince, but it was a metaphor. You nod. And this? He doesn't answer. The afternoon stretches on, warm and slow. A cow moos. Another cow responds, somewhat sarcastically. Apollo pretends not to notice. Instead, he begins practicing names for each animal. One becomes Theodora of the Lazy Steppe. Another he calls Mud Thief. You suspect he's bonding. There's a kind of grace to it all, unexpected, like finding poetry in a shopping list. The god who once rode across the sky in a chariot of flame now tries to coax a stubborn calf from behind a bush using a tune that sounds suspiciously like an insult set to music. By dusk, the cows are loosely gathered, and Apollo manages to guide them back to their stone enclosure using only a stick and a dramatic scowl. One cow kicks over a water basin. Apollo lets it happen. Growth. He leans against a wall, breath shallow, hair wild, and eyes surprisingly soft. I don't understand, he says. They ignore me, but they don't run. You shrug. Maybe they trust a god who sweats. He laughs, just once, a short, startled bark of amusement. That night, as the stars scatter like spilled rice across the sky, you watch Apollo lie back against the earth, one hand resting lightly on his makeshift lyre, the other scratching idly behind a calf's ear. He doesn't glow. He doesn't float. He just stays. And for a moment, that seems divine enough. The morning comes gently again, sliding its fingers across the hills of Thessaly and warming the dew-kissed earth one blade of grass at a time. You sit up slowly, brushing sleep from your eyes as a bee lazily drifts past your head, off to harass a flower or two. Apollo is already awake, his golden hair somehow even more tangled than it was yesterday, and he's pacing in front of the cow enclosure like a general preparing for war. Except instead of armor, he's wearing the same dust-streaked chiton, and instead of a sword, he's holding a crooked stick that may or may not have once been part of a grape trellis. They are planning something, he mutters. You glance at the cows. They are, to all appearances, not planning anything beyond slowly chewing their way through breakfast. But Apollo is not to be deterred. He's taken to the cowherd role with a mix of exaggerated gravitas and complete incompetence, and today he has decided to lean fully into the art of strategy. You trail him through the fields, where he attempts various herding methods. First, the broad sweep, where he waves his stick with a dramatic flourish and declares, "Go forth, beasts." Predictably, they do not. Then, the personalized approach, where he kneels beside each cow and whispers what sound like stern lullabies in ancient Doric. Again, no notable result. Finally, he tries the silent stare. This lasts precisely 3 minutes before a fly lands on his nose and ruins the effect. Historians still argue whether this pastoral phase in Apollo's myth cycle was meant to humanize him for worshippers or simply mock the idea of a sun god doing grunt work. Some sources suggest it was an allegory for the descent into mortality, a way to explain his temporary fall from celestial grace. Others think it was just a prank by Zeus that got out of hand. You're beginning to lean toward the prank theory. Around midday, something finally works. It's not the strategy, or the stick, or the poetry. It's the shade. Apollo, exhausted, drops to a patch of olive-dappled shadow and begins humming softly. A low, easy tune that matches the rhythm of the wind. One cow saunters over, then another. Soon the entire herd is clustered nearby, their tails flicking slowly, eyes half lidded, basking in the same slow calm. Apollo doesn't notice until he opens one eye and sees a sea of bovine faces looking back. They respond to music, he says, stunned. You nod. Imagine that. From then on, he changes tactics. No more yelling, no more elaborate stick gestures. Just tunes, plucked from reeds, hummed into the breeze, tapped gently against his knee, and the cows follow. You spend the afternoon in a kind of strange harmony. Apollo invents melodies. The cows move. You call it divine jazz. He pretends not to like the term, but he keeps doing it anyway. By evening, the field glows with that particular golden hour warmth that makes everything look painted. Apollo is reclining on a rock, crafting a new song about hoofbeats and heartbreak. A cow is chewing his robe. He lets it happen. From the hillside, a few villagers watch and whisper. They've noticed. The strange sun-colored man who sings to cows and sleeps on the ground. One child waves. Apollo blinks at them and waves back. There's something oddly peaceful about this rhythm. Wake, herd, hum, rest, repeat. You wouldn't say Apollo's happy, not yet, but he's quieter, less performative, more present. Later that night, under a sky smeared with starlight, you ask if he misses Olympus. He doesn't answer right away. I miss the view, he says eventually, and not having mud between my toes. Then he pauses. But this isn't awful. High praise, coming from the god of melodrama. The cows settle in their enclosure, breathing slow and deep. Apollo leans back, cradling his homemade instrument, plucking one soft note at a time. You drift off beside him, lulled by the gentlest lullaby this side of Mount Helicon. And just before sleep claims you, you hear him whisper, mostly to himself, "They're better company than half my family." You hum in agreement, already dreaming of sun-warmed grass and musical cow stampedes. It's just before dawn when you're woken by an unexpected noise, not the usual lowing of cows or Apollo grumbling about foot blisters, but something sharper, metallic, rhythmic, like someone rearranging bronze cookware very angrily. You sit up to find Apollo standing in the middle of the enclosure, clutching a tally stick in one hand and pointing wildly at the herd with the other. Someone, he announces with operatic gloom, has tampered with the numerical balance of my cows. You blink. Someone stole a cow? No, he says. Worse, someone moved them. You look at the herd. They seem perfectly placid, arranged in an almost adorable cluster, tails swaying in unison. But Apollo is certain. They were in a diagonal grid pattern last night. Now they're chaotic. This is what happens when you give a god of order a pastoral chore. He's taken to counting them daily with near fanatical precision. Not just total numbers, but spatial distribution, hoof patterns, and, most impressively, the unique spiral hair whorl on each forehead. As he sets about recalculating his bovine ledger, you lean against a fence and yawn. The sun's not even up yet, and Apollo has already invented the world's first cow census. Maybe they moved on their own, you offer helpfully. Apollo shoots you a look that could curdle fresh milk. They don't do that, not without guidance. Not these ones. He's convinced something, or someone, is tampering with the herd. And to be fair, you have noticed odd things lately. A cow inexplicably muddy after a dry night, hoofprints that lead to nowhere, a faint smell of mischief on the wind. You begin to suspect the cows have a secret life. Historians still debate the meaning of this part of the myth. Was Apollo's obsession with cow logistics a metaphor for the god trying to impose cosmic order on the randomness of the mortal world? Or was it just the poetic way the ancients described a god's nervous breakdown in the face of agriculture? Either way, Apollo's spiral into cow-related paranoia is oddly endearing. To try and regain control, he begins assigning duties to each cow. One is scout, another is honor guard, there's left flank. There's even one named Cassandra, who always moos when trouble is about to happen, or so Apollo claims. By noon, he's installed a rudimentary tracking system involving pebbles and sticks. You resist the urge to tell him it's wildly ineffective. He's too proud of it. He's also started naming them in poetic couplets. You overhear, Heliodora, bright of brow, you smell of sun and shadow now. Mopsa, dark and horned with grace, do not lick your sister's face. It's deeply silly and surprisingly lovely. Later, a shepherd from a neighboring village stops by. He carries cheese, a gift of curiosity, and openly stares at the spectacle of a gleaming demigod reciting cow poetry into the breeze. Apollo nods graciously and accepts the cheese like it's a diplomatic offering from a foreign king. The shepherd asks if the god always talks to cows. Apollo, deadpan, they're better listeners than mortals. The shepherd shrugs. Fair. The afternoon heat presses down like a warm blanket, and even the cows move more slowly. Apollo continues counting, adjusting, muttering ratios under his breath. You sit in the shade and consider whether this might be the ancient Greek version of spreadsheet burnout. Still, something about the whole scene begins to grow on you. The soft clinking of cowbells, the earthy smell of hay and divine frustration, the rhythm of Apollo's footsteps pacing the field, like a celestial accountant trying to balance chaos. By evening, he collapses onto the grass beside you. I may have overcommitted, he admits. You raise an eyebrow. To herd management? To this entire lifestyle, he groans. My hands have blisters. You both lie back and stare at the sky. The first stars blink into place. Somewhere, a cow belches softly, and in that moment of absolute pastoral absurdity, you feel something approaching peace. Apollo hums under his breath. A low, steady melody that matches the movement of the stars above and the slow heartbeat of the earth below. His song is about symmetry and silence, about circles and stubbornness, about counting things that will never really stay counted. You fall asleep before he finishes. You wake to find a cow's nose pressed gently against your face. Its breath is warm, slightly sour, and smells vaguely of wild oregano. You blink, and it blinks back. Big, dumb eyes full of mystery. Then it licks your forehead and ambles off like nothing happened. Apollo, meanwhile, is mid-rant, not furious, just theatrically offended in the way only a god forced to herd livestock can be. They moved again, he says, pointing to the hoof prints. In the night, always in the night. You glance around. Nothing seems amiss. The cows are lazily chewing cud, arranged in what appears to be a very natural cow-shaped cluster. But Apollo is certain. His carefully crafted formation is once again ruined. I had a spiral, he insists. A radiant spiral. You sip some morning barley water and offer a non-committal grunt. Secretly, you're impressed that he's making spirals out of livestock. Not even mortal shepherds try that hard. But he's not wrong. The hoofprints tell a strange story. Deep impressions heading south, then suddenly west, then looping absurdly into a tight curve before vanishing into thinner soil. No drag marks, no panic, just oddly deliberate steps. And here's the kicker. They're backward. Apollo crouches down, touching one carefully. They were led away. But whoever did this reversed the hooves. You frown. Why? He doesn't answer, but the sky darkens slightly, as if even Olympus is frowning in confusion. This, dear sleeper, is the part of the myth where it stops being a divine odd job and starts being a cosmic prank. Because somewhere, not too far from your humble pasture, a godling with sticky fingers is laughing his celestial head off. Enter Hermes. Now, to understand Hermes at this point in the myth, you have to picture a baby, not a toddler, a newborn, swaddled but scheming. Historians still debate whether the tale of Hermes' cow theft is allegorical or a wild story someone made up after drinking too much date wine. Either way, it's canon. The story goes, Hermes, fresh out of the cradle, decided that baby steps were for mortals. So he walked out of his cave, invented sandals, put them on backward, and tiptoed off to steal Apollo's cows. Why? Because he could. Along the way, he supposedly composed a lullaby so enchanting it put any witnesses, and allegedly a dog, into a dreamlike stupor. The cows, lulled and dazed, followed him willingly. That's right, not kidnapped, recruited. You tell Apollo this theory. He scoffs. Impossible. Infants don't walk. You remind him, they also don't build lyres out of tortoise shells. And yet, he pinches the bridge of his nose. Zeus is going to love this. That day, you and Apollo follow the trail. It's more art installation than crime scene. Hoof prints that disappear and reappear. Reeds twisted into knots. The occasional feather left dangling from a bush. Hermes has left a trail not to hide, but to be admired. You hike over low hills, pass olive groves that shimmer like mirrors, and descend into a shady glade where the trail ends. Nothing, just silence, and the faint scent of something sweet, like honey gone just a little too old. Apollo stares into the empty space. He's mocking me, he says, not with anger, but with something closer to awe. An infant, mocking me. You sit on a rock and wait. There's nothing else to do. When gods quarrel, time itself tends to bend slightly. The cows, wherever they are probably sipping spring water and being serenaded with panpipes. Eventually, Apollo turns to you and sighs. We're going to Olympus? You blink. To talk to Zeus? No, he says, brushing grass off his robe. To complain, loudly. And just like that, the pastoral interlude ends, for now. Because somewhere behind that celestial curtain, A baby is strumming a lyre made from a tortoise, and the world is about to witness one of mythology's pettiest family feuds. By the time you and Apollo reach the foot of Mount Olympus, you're sore, dusty, and more than a little sunburned. Apollo, of course, still looks like he just stepped off a fresco, minus the glower, which has now settled into a kind of simmering, philosophical dismay. He hasn't spoken much since the last hoofprint disappeared near a mossy boulder shaped suspiciously like a smug smile. Occasionally, he mutters things under his breath, things like tiny lyre-strumming menace, and he's not even weaned. The climb is surprisingly chill for a literal trip to heaven. The path winds through ancient pines, and the air gets sweeter the higher you go. Birds sing in unintelligible iambic couplets. Somewhere, a nymph is humming off-key. It's all very scenic, which is not helping Apollo's mood. At the top, the gates of Olympus part without fanfare. No thunder, no clouds swirling dramatically. Just two golden doors and a bored-looking satyr holding a clipboard. Visiting? He asks, chewing on something that might be laurel. Complaint, Apollo says. The satyr grunts and waves you through. Olympus is surprisingly bureaucratic these days. Inside, it's less palace and more celestial lounge. Marble halls give way to floating courtyards, and ambrosia carts roll past unattended. You catch sight of Aphrodite laughing over something scandalous. Dionysus is already tipsy, and it's not even noon. And there, in the middle of it all, is a baby. Hermes, god of travel, trickery, and terribly clever one-liners, is lounging in a sling of stars, gnawing on a fig and strumming an impossibly tiny lyre. He's also humming, not a lullaby, not a song, a theme, his theme. Apollo storms up. You, he begins, finger pointed. Hermes looks up with big, round eyes and says, "Moo." You try not to laugh. You fail. Apollo, to his credit, doesn't smite anything. Instead, he launches into a divine soliloquy about theft, deception, and the sanctity of bovine order. Hermes, meanwhile, composes a haiku about cow footprints and innocence. The argument escalates into a full sibling spat. "You're grounded," Apollo insists. "I was never ungrounded," Hermes replies. "I'm 4 days old." Zeus arrives mid-insult, robe askew and munching on grapes. He listens to Apollo's accusations, Hermes' counter-lullabies, and your completely unnecessary eyewitness account. Then he laughs, loudly, deeply. The kind of laugh that shakes constellations out of alignment. "This," Zeus says, "is excellent." Historians still argue whether Zeus sided with Hermes because he was genuinely amused or simply wanted to encourage divine mischief. Some say it was a test of Apollo's patience. Others believe it was Hermes' first step toward godhood, a rite of passage disguised as petty crime. Either way, the verdict is swift. Hermes will return the cows. Apollo will accept a gift in compensation, and the entire affair will be recorded in the Scrolls of Olympus under Noteworthy Shenanigans, Volume 2. Apollo sulks. Hermes, unfazed, offers a lyre, a real one, polished, tuned, shaped from a tortoise shell, strung with golden hair, and engraved with tiny hoofprints. Apollo examines it with the caution of someone who's previously been serenaded into mild humiliation. He strums a note. It's beautiful, soft, resonant, full of that strange balance between structure and spontaneity, like the sound a sunrise might make if it wanted to compliment you. Apollo blinks, strums again, and again. Then he looks at Hermes. This doesn't mean I like you. Hermes shrugs. That's okay. I like me enough for both of us. You step back as they continue negotiating, which now mostly involves musical puns and smug baby grins. Somewhere in the distance, a cow moos. You hope it's not Cassandra again. She's always moaning about bad timing. You're dismissed shortly after, with a polite nod from Zeus and a free cup of ambrosia gelato. As you follow Apollo back down the mountain, the lyre slung casually across his back, you ask what's next. He sighs. I suppose I retrieve my cows. You nod, and then he doesn't answer, but he's already humming a new tune, one you haven't heard before, one shaped like a spiral. By the time you and Apollo return to the fields, the sun is dipping low, casting long golden streaks across the land like spilled honey. Apollo, still plucking at his new lyre, seems calmer now, though you notice he's added a very pointed motif to his melody that sounds suspiciously like moo. You find the cows exactly where Hermes said they'd be, gathered beside a small stream, chewing cud like nothing has happened. No signs of trauma, no signs of divine escapade, just a suspiciously well-aligned group of bovines, standing in, wait for it, a radiant spiral. Oh, now they do it, Apollo mutters, scowling affectionately. Cassandra moos. Apollo ignores her. He steps into the pasture, lyre in hand, and begins tuning it against the soft burble of the stream. The cows don't scatter. They don't charge. In fact, they lean in, curious, like critics at a debut performance. One even lifts a hoof as if to keep rhythm. Apollo plays. Not a grand overture, not a lightning bolt ballad, just a gentle, looping tune that rolls like a wagon wheel over gravel, steady, musical, oddly hypnotic. The cows respond. They sway slightly. One sneezes in time. You think you see one of them close its eyes in appreciation. Historians still argue whether this mythical cow-herding lyre solo was real or a poetic exaggeration meant to demonstrate Apollo's mastery of all arts, even the bovine. Some texts describe the scene with excessive metaphor, cows melting like wax under melody, or swirling as if danced by the breeze of music. Others simply say, he played, they listened. You sit nearby, watching as the field slowly becomes an open-air concert hall for creatures with 4 stomachs and very specific tastes in rhythm. By dusk, the cows are neatly corralled. Cassandra is nibbling a reed. Apollo sets the lyre down and exhales dramatically. They're not bad, he admits, for cows. You nudge him gently. And Hermes? He grunts, a goblin in god form. But he doesn't argue when you point out that he's been strumming that goblin's gift non-stop since leaving Olympus. The next few days unfold with strange ease. Apollo resumes his cowherd duties, but with a new rhythm, less micromanagement, more melody. The cows fall into line with a kind of musical choreography. One villager swears they've seen them waltz. You develop a routine. Mornings begin with a lyre tune and olive bread. Midday means napping in the shade and trying to invent new cow names that rhyme with bliss. Evenings are for storytelling, with Apollo narrating tales that somehow always involve him triumphing over ridiculous odds, and usually a snake. One afternoon, a poet from a neighboring valley stops by. Word has spread of the golden cowherd, and now people are curious. The poet is thin, sunburnt, and immediately launches into a monologue about the metaphysical symbolism of hoofprints. Apollo listens patiently, miraculously, and then responds with a short melody that mimics the rhythm of the poet's words. It's oddly touching. The poet weeps and offers him half a fig cake in gratitude. "You're becoming approachable," you whisper later. "I'm becoming tolerant," Apollo corrects. "Do not confuse that with approachable." But he doesn't throw the fig cake away. The cows, too, seem transformed. Or perhaps you're just seeing them differently now. Each one has its quirks. Mopsa likes to roll in dust. Heliodora hums, yes, hums, when she's happy. And Cassandra, of course, still predicts doom whenever it's about to rain. Apollo has even started composing little musical vignettes for each one. They're not elaborate, just a few notes, but they carry emotion, humor, affection. Sometimes a cow will move a response, and Apollo will pretend it's accidental. You know better. In the distance, the hills are beginning to take on the muted tones of late summer. The grass isn't as green. The shadows stretch longer. Something is changing. You ask if Apollo's punishment is over. He shrugs. "I haven't been recalled, but I suspect this is voluntary now." He doesn't say it, but you both know. This isn't just about cows anymore. This is about pause, about purpose, about finding stillness in repetition and music in the mundane, and perhaps, just perhaps, about learning to be divine without needing to shine all the time. You lie back in the grass as Apollo strums another gentle tune. The cows settle in around you, warm and solid and deeply unimpressed by your existential realizations. Somewhere, far off, Hermes probably giggles. But here, in this moment, with your feet in the dirt and music in the air, everything feels exactly as it should. A few mornings later, you wake to find Apollo sitting unusually still, not serenading cows, not counting hoofprints, just staring into the distance, Lyre resting across his knees like a sleeping pet. You shuffle over, still clutching a piece of barley bread. He gestures toward the horizon. "Visitors," he says flatly. You squint. Two figures approach along the ridge, their robes fluttering in the breeze like slightly judgmental curtains. As they draw closer, the smell of sage, sandalwood, and official divine business becomes unmistakable. Hermes and Iris, messenger and rainbow, mischief and bureaucracy. Hermes arrives first, skipping across the stones with all the reverence of a child arriving late to recess. He wakes up. "Nice spiral," he calls, eyeing the cow formation. "Improved symmetry." Iris follows at a more graceful pace, her expression unreadable. She nods once at Apollo, once at you, and then pulls a scroll from her sash. "You've been summoned," she says. "Not punished, not banished, just needed." Apollo takes the scroll but doesn't open it. He looks at the cows, then at the sky. Then he sighs. Of course. You don't ask what the scroll says. You don't need to. The gods work in circles. No one gets to stay in one place forever. Still, it's not dramatic. There's no lightning bolt, no sudden vanishing, just quiet understanding. Hermes plucks a reed and begins braiding it. "You did good here, Sunbeam," he says. Apollo raises an eyebrow. Is that supposed to be encouraging? Terrifyingly so. Historians still debate the symbolism of this moment in the Apollo mythos, if it ever truly happened. Was it a fable about temporary humility? A story to remind even gods that mastery requires patience? Or was it simply a celestial daydream invented by ancient poets who loved the idea of Apollo being dunked by dairy? The cows don't care. Cassandra lets out a half-hearted moo, which Apollo insists is a farewell. You're not sure. He turns to you. I'm leaving the lyre. You blink. What? You'll play it. They'll respond. You're adequate. It's the nicest thing he's said to you all week. He sets the lyre in your hands. It hums faintly, as if recognizing a new owner. The string shimmer is soft, gentler than you expected. It's not a gift. It's a trust exercise. Hermes slaps you on the back. Try not to invent any new musical scales. Apollo's still traumatized from the last time someone tried that. Iris extends her hand to Apollo. The scroll she delivered now curls into smoke, dissolving in a scent of myrrh and memory. Apollo takes her hand, not looking back, but before they vanish, he pauses. You'll need to feed Cassandra separately, he mutters. She bites when jealous, and just like that, he's gone. You stand in the field, alone except for a herd of very curious cows and a divine lyre that now hums with responsibility. The sun rises, and the pasture warms. You strum a note. It's awkward, hesitant, a little flat. Cassandra snorts, but Mupsa twitches her ear. You strum again. This time, a melody finds you, simple, spiraling, familiar. It weaves through the field, between cowbell clinks and the rustle of wind-blown grass. The cows move, slowly, gracefully. It's not Apollo's song. It's yours now. Days pass, then weeks, and with each one, you fall deeper into a rhythm that feels both ancient and brand new. You, the lyre, and the cows, an unexpected trio writing a slow, looping melody into the hills of Thessaly. You don't try to fill Apollo's sandals, no one could, but you do discover that cows have opinions, moods, even taste in music. Mopsa likes fast, bouncy tunes. She dances, literally. Cassandra prefers minor chords and moody refrains. You suspect she's composing her own tragic ballad. You even start naming their dances, the cud waltz, the horn sway, and your personal favorite, dramatic grass paw with accidental flatulence. But it's not just about the cows anymore. The locals have begun to take notice. First, a shepherd boy peers through the thistles. Then, a baker's apprentice sets up a picnic just beyond the fence. Soon, people are coming to listen, to watch. They don't ask questions. They just sit, sip water from clay cups, and let the music carry them. Someone starts bringing figs. Someone else offers plums. Before long, you have an entire unofficial audience. You still play, not for applause, not for praise, just to keep the rhythm. And yet, there's something sacred in it. One evening, a scholar joins the gathering, older, dusty, wrapped in robes that smell like ink and lavender. She listens for hours, then leans in close and whispers, "Did you know Apollo invented harmony? Not music, harmony, the pause between notes, the quiet in between." You nod. Somehow you already knew. Historians still argue whether this pastoral interlude in Apollo's story was meant to show his transformation or simply fill in a strange blank in divine chronology. After all, gods aren't supposed to herd cows, and yet here you are, keeping the myth alive. You ask the scholar why she's come. She shrugs. Curiosity and insomnia. You smile. Fair enough. That night, you host an impromptu poetry reading. Someone recites a love sonnet to a cheese wheel. Another person tries haiku. Terrible, chaotic haiku. You laugh harder than you have in weeks. Later, under the stars, a boy asks if you're going to stay forever. You pause. I don't know. Because even though your days now taste like honey and thyme, and your fingers hum from constant music, you feel a tug, a whisper, a breeze from higher places. Olympus remembers its own. The lyre seems to hum differently at night now, not louder, just more aware. It's as if it knows a new chapter waits, and it's trying to prepare you. You start playing more at dusk, when the sky blushes and the shadows stretch like long, sleepy sighs. That's when the cows seem their most reflective. That's when the stories flow easiest from visitors. Stories about lost coins, lucky stars, first kisses, failed soup. Each tale carries weight, not because it's dramatic, but because someone took the time to tell it, slowly, softly. You begin to understand what Apollo might have felt. The stillness in repetition, the joy in gentle mastery, the holiness of a pause. The cows nuzzle you more now. Cassandra lets you scratch behind her ears without prophesying doom. Heliodora follows you like a very plodding, cud-chewing shadow. And every so often, a breeze carries a faint whiff of sandalwood and sarcasm. Hermes has been watching. He never says hello, never announces himself. But you find little gifts left on a fence post, a walnut carved into a whistle, a piece of string shaped into a perfect spiral. One morning, you find a feather tucked into the lyre's strings. It hums when you touch it. You don't ask for explanations. This isn't that kind of story. Instead, you keep playing. Because sometimes, when dusk falls just right and the cows all lie down in near perfect rows, you catch a flicker of golden light beyond the horizon. A whisper of a god, watching his melody live on immortal hands. Mornings now begin with song, not chores. You wake to birds tucked into branches, the lyre humming in your hand, as if it slept alongside you. The cows, noticing your movement, gather in semicircle, ears tilted, eager for the first note of the day. Today's tune starts slow, a gentle spiral ascending and descending between strings. It mirrors the dew-damp pasture, the curve of distant hills, the rhythm of cattlebell. You wonder if you've invented mornings in Thessaly or simply learned them. By noon, travelers arrive, two sisters carrying goats and olives, curious at the sight of musician and bovine audience. They sit, cross-legged, offering bread and dried figs. And you play. They listen. The cows sway. No words needed. Music as communion. Historians still argue whether Apollo's lyre, cow concert, was mythic metaphor or early form of pastoral ritual. Some suggest it influenced later rural ceremonies, where shepherds played rhapsodic tunes for their flocks. Others claim that cows simply appreciated good music. Either way, the motif endures. In the afternoon heat, you drift through the pasture, lyre slung over shoulder, letting the cows lead you toward shade. A calf wobbles close, sniffing your sandal. You pause, strum a lullaby. The calf settles. You realize this is the deepest intimacy you've known in weeks. As the sisters depart, gifted a string melody in thanks, you notice the subtle change in the land. The pasture thrums softly, as if humming with memory. That evening, you sit on a rock overlooking the herd, play a tune for Heliodora's sunset, a lullaby for Mopsa's dreams, and a soft moan in minor for Cassandra's half-sentient forewarnings. The lyre responds to moonlight, each note looping like a spiral around time. Somewhere, another breeze carries faint laughter, Hermes, perhaps, enjoying the legacy of a prank turned melody. You don't mind. Tonight, the pasture is your temple. You close your eyes and strum one final chord. The cows settle, the wind croons, the stars blink awake. You belong here now. The seasons shift without asking your permission. One day, you're wiping summer's dust from your sandals, and the next, you're wrapping a rough spun shawl around your shoulders, watching clouds scuttle like sheep across a cool gray sky. The cows don't seem to mind. They graze slower now, more contemplative. The grass is drier, the flowers fewer, but the rhythms remain. You play your morning tune, slightly lower, a touch slower. The cows respond in kind. Heliodora moos in D minor. Mopsa does a clumsy pirouette and lands in a bush. Cassandra sighs theatrically, predicting winter's arrival for the fifth time this week. The crowd of listeners has thinned. The baker's apprentice now bakes bread in the mornings. The poet from the valley left behind a scroll and a basket of grapes. Even the goats have wandered off. But still, you play. Because now it's not performance. It's habit, prayer, breathing. One night, as the fire crackles and the stars draw their slow constellations, you see it. A streak of gold through the sky. Not a meteor, not a cloud. Apollo. Not descending, not dramatic, just passing by, watching, maybe checking your progress, maybe playing a note of his own. You nod toward the sky, a thank you for the music, for the cows, for the spiral-shaped purpose you never knew you needed. Historians still argue about what happened to the lyre next. Did it become an heirloom? Was it passed on to bards? Was it turned into a constellation? You wouldn't know. You still have it. And sometimes, when you set it down beside a sleeping cow, you swear it hums even when untouched. Your days are filled with melody and weather. Your nights with dreams shaped like songs. You're not divine, not a hero, just someone who learned to listen, and that, somehow, has made all the difference. By now, you've developed a talent for interpreting cow moods better than most weather vanes interpret wind. You can sense when Mopsa is about to sneeze, or when Cassandra is on the brink of a prophetic tantrum, usually about rain, always with dramatic eye rolls. But today feels different. There's a stillness in the air, not ominous, not empty, just still, as if the world is listening. You pluck a single note from the lyre. The cows lift their heads. Even the birds pause mid-chirp. The sound hovers, then sinks into the grass like dew. You hear footsteps. A child appears, a girl, no older than 10, with wild curls and a tunic patched in every color of the forest. She holds a wooden flute, carved crudely but clearly loved. No shoes, no fear. She sits beside you without asking, mimics your melody, slightly out of tune but perfectly in spirit. You nod. Together you play. Lyre and flute, sun and breeze. It's not a concert. It's not a ritual. It's a shared exhale. By the time the cows settle again, the girl is gone, vanished like mist. Only the echo of her tune remains. The lyre hums approval. Historians still debate the significance of child prophets or music spirits in lesser myths. Some say they were messengers of the muses. Others, fragments of mortal hope. Or maybe, as one inscription suggests, sometimes the gods borrow smaller voices. That night, the village elder visits. He brings honey cakes and silence. After 2, he finally says, "There's a rumor that you can calm storms." You smile. "Only cows." "Same thing," he mutters. The wind picks up, leaves swirl, the lyre trembles gently in your lap. You pluck a minor chord, then a hopeful one. The wind hushes. The elder nods and leaves. You're not sure what you're becoming, but it's something more than a shepherd, less than a god, a melody between breaths, a harmony in hoofbeats, and for now, that's enough. The first snow falls like a song, light, hesitant, almost shy. It dusts the hills in silver, turns the cows into slow-moving mounds of steam and fur, and wraps the world in a blanket of hush. You play your morning notes with gloved fingers now. The lyre doesn't mind. It sings through the cold, adapting to your pace, your breath, the slower rhythm of a winter pasture. Mopsa discovers she can eat snow. Cassandra warns about avalanches. Heliodora tries to catch flakes on her tongue, misses, and slips into a snowbank. The herd huddles together, forming a perfect spiral in the frost-dusted grass. You've learned to read more than hoofprints and harmony now. You've begun to read silences, when someone pauses too long before a story, when the cows gather tighter than usual, when the wind carries a memory, not just a chill. One afternoon, a traveler stumbles into the field. tall, cloaked, shaking off snow like a shaggy dog. He carries a lute strung with threadbare gut, and he calls himself Damaris. You offer bread. He accepts, then he plays. It's unexpected, not bad, just raw. Each note like a broken fence post, sturdy but weathered. His music isn't divine, it's human, heavy with grief, joy, and too much wine. You play in answer, and for a moment, your melodies braid, lyre and lute, frost and fire. When Damaris leaves, he presses a pebble into your palm. For memory, he says, then vanishes down the slope, trailing chords behind like footprints. Historians still argue whether musicians were considered sacred in ancient myths. Some texts claim bards were half oracles, others call them dangerous distractions, but all agree those who could shape silence were to be watched and occasionally feared. You, meanwhile, have earned neither fear nor worship, just quiet respect. A baker sends bread in spirals. A potter brings a fincan shaped like a cow. A child leaves snowberries at your fence, arranged like notes. You're not a god, but your music lives in mouths, hands, and hooves. And that, in winter, is warmth enough. Spring returns slowly, like a cat deciding whether to trust you. First, the snowmelt trickles down the hills in hesitant rivulets. Then, green edges start creeping along the field, curling around old hoof prints and the spiral paths you and the cows have carved into the land. Mopsa is the first to celebrate. She sneezes dramatically and dances in a half circle, tail flicking in delight. Heliodora follows, more dignified, but equally joyful. Even Cassandra admits, with a snort, that the world is no longer ending. You pluck the lyre, and the tune that emerges is lighter than you expect. Not cheerful, exactly, more curious. It stretches upward like a vine, as if searching for something just out of reach. The cows seem to hear it too. They form new shapes in their grazing patterns. Stars, circles, what might be a constellation of udders. You notice how the villagers have returned, bit by bit. The shepherd boy brings a new puppy, who tries to herd Cassandra and is promptly scolded. The baker's apprentice gives you honey shaped like a lyre. The poet reappears with 3 new verses and a sheep named Metaphor. You've become more than a musician. You're part of a myth that continues without you noticing. You catch stories whispered by firesides of a lyre player who can soothe tempests, make cows confess, and freeze quarrels mid-argument with a single chord. One evening, a scribe visits. She watches your fingers, asks questions, sketches the cows. She doesn't stay long, but weeks later, someone shows you a scroll with your name twisted into poetry, the herd singer. You don't know whether to laugh or hide, so instead, you play. Historians still argue whether such figures were real or exaggerated, if divine instruments could truly be passed down, or if the power always belonged to the gods. But here, in the curl of your hand, around the lyre's neck, you feel no illusion, just warmth, just presence. Spring deepens. Wildflowers bloom along the paths you've walked every day. The cows nap in dappled sunlight. You lie beside them, plucking lazy tunes into the air, watching bees stumble from blossom to blossom like tiny drunk dancers. You've stopped waiting for a return to Olympus. You realize now, Olympus isn't a place, it's a moment, and this slow, imperfect, sacred daily rhythm is yours. The wind carries summer in its breath again, warm, heady, and faintly scented with time. You wake before the sun most mornings, not because you must, but because the hush before dawn holds the clearest notes. Even a lyre seems to prefer the half-light. You've taken to improvising now. No full songs, no set rhythms, just small spirals of sound that rise with the heat and fall with the insects' hum. The cows recognize these patterns too. Mopsa tilts her ears. Cassandra paces her predictions to your tempo. Heliodora, ever the dignified one, nods as if approving your phrasing. Sometimes visitors still arrive. A soldier passing through leaves a carved button. A priest murmurs a prayer and listens for 5 heartbeats. A young girl performs a dance in exchange for a lullaby. You give what you can, take only stories. And now, a new one arrives, unexpected, tall, quiet as smoke. A stranger wrapped in a traveler's cloak, face hidden beneath a hood. You watch from your stone as he approaches, curious but calm. He doesn't speak at first, just listens. You play, slowly, one note, then another. Then he lifts his hand, and in it, a reed flute, ancient, familiar. He joins in. The melody you make together is imperfect, bending and slipping like water, but somehow complete, like 2 puzzle pieces, not meant to fit, but determined to try anyway. When the tune ends, he nods once, then turns to go. You don't need to ask who he was. Some things are best left unspoken. But when he vanishes into the shimmering heat, you notice the lyre feels heavier, wiser. That night, the cows sleep in a perfect spiral again, their breathing soft, synchronized. And you sit by the fire, plucking the same lullaby you played on your very first morning, the one that began this whole impossible journey. Only now it's deeper, richer, yours. And now, with the stars above us and the fire fading into soft crackles, let's let the story settle. You can picture the field, can't you? That gentle slope dotted with drowsy cows, their flanks rising and falling like tides in the moonlight. The last wisps of melody hanging in the air, curling slowly downwards like fallen leaves. The lyre rests beside you, quiet for now, but not forgotten. It still holds every note, every hoofbeat, every whisper of divine mischief that passed through your hands. It remembers you, and you, soft-breathed and still, remember it in turn. Out beyond the pasture, crickets sing their tiny symphonies. A warm breeze nudges the grass. Maybe you see a light flicker in the distance, an echo of Olympus, or maybe just someone else sitting by their own small fire, telling their own quiet story. You did good. You listened. You learned. You created rhythm from routine and melody from moments most would overlook. Now, let the quiet carry you. Let your limbs grow heavy, the way cows do when they trust they're safe. Let your breath slow with the rhythm of old songs. Let yourself spiral gently inward, the way music always circles back to silence. Sleep now, herd singer. Your myth can wait till morning.